politicians themselves have not developed enough reflex to be
Hello and welcome to the second segment of the Platform 2020. This is a special edition to mark Nigeria's 60th independence anniversary. Sincere apologies for the slight delay. We had to ensure that the broadcast of the main event has gone on the way to some extent before we could kick off the webinar sessions. Welcome to all our panelists and to every attendee who has taken time out to celebrate Nigeria's independence on this platform. So I'm Emana Ambrose Amawhe, and I'll be moderating this special webinar session. And I'll have a couple of panelists who will be joining the discourse. But before then, let me talk us through on what the crux of the discussion today is all about. We'll be talking today about exporting Nigeria's culture through fashion. We know that Nigeria's cultural heritage is diverse and extremely rich. And what better way to sell our story to the rest of the world than by a language that is globally understood and accepted? That's fashion. Estimates place the global fashion industry at about $2.5 trillion. But Africa accounts for just a percentage of that figure. And the numbers even grow smaller when you come to sub-Saharan Africa, which accounts for just about $31 billion. And Nigeria has just about 15% out of that $31 billion. And that's why this discussion is timely. We are going to be delving in to find out how the fashion industry can serve as an alternative revenue generating source to grow the economy. The objectives of this virtual dialogue are to highlight Nigeria's rich cultural heritage and the role of fashion in changing the country's global outlook, to assess the challenges and viability of the fashion industry as a stimulus for revenue generation in a COVID-19 impacted economy, as well as examine ways to improve attractiveness of the emerging Africa fashion market from the Nigerian perspective to engender economic growth. Also identify strategic public-private partnerships to drive non-oil exports, and analyze government policies and regulations as well as interventions to the creative industry. Well, let's get the conversation started. Before I introduce my panelists, there are 4 of them who will be joining the conversation today. I can see 3 of them are already in the meeting room. I'm sure in a short while, our 4th panelist is going to be joining us. Let me just quickly talk us through the format this virtual session will be taking. It's going to be a 70-minute session, and 40 minutes will be dedicated to the panel discussions. Thereafter, another 20 minutes will be dedicated to the question and answer session. So you could make group of the Q&A box, send in your questions as the conversations are underway, so you're sure of getting direct answers. You can also make use of the chat room to share your comments, whatever observations you may have as the program progresses. So let's get right down to the business of the day. I'll quickly share my screen as I begin introductions. Do stay with us. Okay, while I'm still trying to share my screen, I'll just run along straight with the introduction. The first panelist who will be joining the conversation is Olusegun Awolowo. He is the Executive Director of the Nigerian Export Promotion Council. He's yet to join the meeting, and the Nigerian Export Promotion Council is Nigeria's apex organization for the promotion of non-oil exports as a key driver for the diversification of the nation's economy. He leads a team of nearly 400 staff spread across over 20 offices with a headquarters in Abuja. Nigeria's non-oil sector is a major contributor to the nation's GDP and has even greater potential, which is the reason Mr. Awolowo is driving an ambitious zero oil plan as an economic blueprint for Nigeria. Mr. Awolowo currently serves as the International Trade Centers on the International Trade Centers Advisory Board, and under his leadership, the NEPC has won the ITC's prestigious World Trade Promotion Organization 2018 award for the best initiative to ensure trade is inclusive and sustainable. And also on the panel, I have Dr. Muda Yusuf. He is the Director General of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry. He is an economist and has contributed immensely to the national economic discourse through his research-based analysis of policies of government as they affect various sectors of the economy. Dr. Yusuf obtained his bachelor's and master's degrees in economics from the University of Ilorin, Nigeria, and the University of Lagos, Nigeria, respectively. He also holds a doctorate degree in business administration from the Swiss Business School, Switzerland. He has participated in various high-level public policy advocacy dialogues at both the federal and state levels with the aim of fostering private sector participation in the Nigerian economic development. He is a leading advocate of an enabling environment for the Nigerian private sector and has vast knowledge and exposure in business research and policy issues as they affect business. Also on the panel is Omoyemi Akerele. She is the founder and executive director of the Lagos Fashion Week and its parent company, the Style House Files. Omoyemi has been instrumental to the prolific rise of the African fashion industry. A former magazine editor of the True Love West Africa with multiple degrees in law, her devotion to see designers from the continent thrive has earned her multiple awards on the continent and globally, including a placement on Business of Fashion's Global 500 list for consecutive years. Under Omoyemi's leadership, the Style House Files is working with Nigerian Export Promotion Council to strengthen the Nigerian fashion industry's local capacity to produce garments commercially for local and export markets. And that's through an initiative called SHF Trains. This involves end-to-end industrial garment manufacturing skills acquisition, training for employability and wealth creation in Nigeria. Omoyemi was on the advisory committee for the Museum of Modern Arts, #Items MoMA. That's the first fashion exhibition in 70 years of MoMA. And she currently sits on the advisory board of the Commonwealth Fashion Council. Her vision is to see Africa's cultural and creative industries contribute sustainability, or substantially rather, to the overall growth and development of the economy. And last but not least is Francis Enakele. Francis is a fashion entrepreneur and also a commercial energy professional with hands-on experience in project financing, strategy development, investment analysis, mergers and acquisitions, and asset management. He also owns several online retail fashion businesses. He has consulted for a range of fashion lines to penetrate into the African retail market and has provided branding, strategy, and business development services to a range of companies in Africa and Europe. Francis is an alumnus of the Robert Gordon University, Aberdeen, United Kingdom, and the University of Lagos, Nigeria. And though he's still a practicing energy professional, his early exposure to the fashion, arts, and entertainment industries have made him passionate about promoting Nigeria's fashion globally as a means of attracting foreign investments into the sector and growing the industry locally. Wow, I am I am surely looking forward to hear the wealth of experience and insights that our panelists will be bringing to the discussion. So I'd like to tell us to fasten our seatbelts as we get the conversation rolling. Thank you again for joining us. All right, Omoyemi, I'm going to start the conversation with you. Not because I'm biased that you're a woman, but it's okay if I am biased. So let me start with you as the lady in the room. How do you think fashion can help promote, and not just promote, preserve Africa's culture?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Omoyemi Akerele. I'm the founder and executive director of Starhouse Files, and Starhouse Files is a fashion business development agency based in Lagos, with a core vision to provide opportunities for access to market for brands in Nigeria, to provide opportunities for capacity building, skills development, and of course to be able to strengthen capacity for apparel and garment production in Nigeria, which we do in collaboration with Nigeria Export Promotion Council. Thank you so much for having me, for inviting me to this talk. And for us, we definitely think that fashion and its contribution to the intersection between fashion and culture is something that's been firmly established. If we look at designers and brands, for example, that we've presented at Lagos Fashion Week over the last 10 years, we can sort of see that there's an ongoing intersectionality between fashion and our culture. Most of what you see out there has been inspired by, artisans or craftsmanship that's been passed down, from generation to generation, either through materials that's based on different communities that spread out across Nigeria. Beyond that, even if we look at the essence of brands that probably don't work with your Ashoke or Akwete or, the fabrics that's unique or woven like that, it's rich. Our fashion industry is rich. It's rich in colors, is rich in textiles, is rich in, the way brands and designers sort of mix and match different things to be able to create the beautiful garments that you see that light up our runway or that is sold across Nigeria. Beyond culture in its transparent form that we can see and touch, culture as well, which is who we are and how, our lifestyle has sort of become culture, right? And if we look at it on that level as well, it's something that's currently being exported either through our music, or through even, if we look closer now, even with Nollywood and all the movies that are currently being made, it speaks to our culture, it speaks to our lifestyle, it speaks to who we are. And this is often translated into garments, which I guess is the one thing that's we all hold that's common to everyone sitting here in this room and obviously beyond. So our fashion is very much an intrinsic part of our culture, part of who we are and where we've come from. And yeah.
Thank you so much for those insights, Omoyemi. While we've taken note of how much fashion and its exports can contribute to our culture, let me move over to you, Dr. Yusuf. We cannot overemphasize the place of the right policies and strategic infrastructure in stimulating the economy. So with this renewed focus of the federal government to diversify into non-oil exports, what policies do you think need to be formulated or implemented, as the case is, and what kind of infrastructure do we need in Nigeria today to drive economic diversification and also showcase the creative industry and export?
Yeah, thank you very much,
Sorry,
Emana.
I apologize, sir. I think there's someone who's representing Mr. Awolowo, Mrs. Etokowo. She's just put a message in the chat so that maybe we can send her a link to let her into the conversation.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, can I go ahead?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay. So thank you very much for inviting me. My name is Muda Yusuf. I'm the Director General of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry. It's a pleasure to be on this platform, a very prestigious platform that a platform has become. Now, if we talk of policies, I think what Omoyemi said is very critical to issues of policy. Because if you must get policy right for any sector, then there must be regular interaction, regular engagement with those who understand the business. That is the only way we can get this economy to be properly diversified. So talking specifically about fashion, I think it is very critical that we engage with those who are operators in the sector, those who are the entrepreneurs in the sector, to know what exactly are their pain points. Then from there, we can evolve very important policy. Now, export business is about competitiveness, because you are taking your products out there, and there are so many other providers. And if you are not competitive, either in terms of quality, in terms of design, in terms of price, then you have no place in export. So competitiveness is key. And when we talk about policy, we should be looking at policies that are designed to promote competitiveness. That is the bottom line. And you look at it through the entire value chain of whatever product we are talking about. In this instance, we are talking about fashion. We start from the inputs, building the capacity for production. What kind of policies do we require to support the inputs that people export? Or those who are in the business of fashion designing, fashion making, dressmaking, what kind of input do they need? In some other clients, there have been support for production through the creation of industrial parks, for instance, free trade zones, supporting them with logistics and so on and so forth, and even skills development. There are also issues about market access. And let me say this, that it is not in all cases that it is those who produce that also export. Some people have competencies in the production and design. They don't have competencies or knowledge in export. Some people have knowledge in exports. They know the market, but they cannot design, they cannot produce. So in many spheres of the economy, there is what we call division of labor. So we also have to bear that in mind. The fact that one is a fashion designer, or a fashion maker, or a dressmaker does not necessarily make the person a good exporter. So having said that, for market access, we need to be looking at policies that will enhance market access. Policies around providing market information, policies around facilitating international collaboration, the type that the Nigerian Export Promotion does, policies around the customs processes, because sometimes the customs can frustrate any business, including exports. So these are some of the things that we need to do around market access. There's also the issue about access to basic inputs. There was a time in this country, not too long ago, there was a proposal to ban importation of fabrics. And the whole idea and the thinking of government at that time was that we wanted to protect the textile industry. They believe that the textile industry will create more jobs and so on and so on. And we told them that first, the textile industries cannot produce the entire range of fabrics that the fashion industry requires. And that the fashion industry is creating even more jobs in terms of quality and in terms of number. It is a labor-intensive sector. It is an inclusive sector. So you cannot kill the fashion industry on the back of wanting to revive the textile mills. So it was a strong argument. I'm not sure till now whether the government agrees with that argument, but we are still on that engagement. So all of these things are important. There's issues of financing policy to support them. Each time we talk about intervention funds, we are always talking about manufacturing, talking about agriculture, and we hardly talk about fashion. You know, and this is a very important sector, as Omoyemi said, in terms of export, in terms of even the image of the country. Then there's also the issue about export proceeds. As a matter of policy, all exporters must have access to their export proceeds. Right now, a lot of exporters are complaining that they undertake an export, they get their foreign currency, and they are being compelled to exchange the foreign currency at a rate that is far lower than the market rate. That is a disincentive for exports. So we need to look around the issues of, you know, exchange rate policy as it affects, you know, export, and as it affects fashion and all of that. So let me stop there.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yusuf. You're welcome to the virtual session, Mrs. Awolowo. It's good to have you on the panel. Thank you for joining us. Okay, so let me come straight to you with this question. Dr. Muda Yusuf has spoken extensively about the policies that should be in place covering finance intervention funds, export proceeds, the textile industry being moribund for some time now. What incentives, talk us through some of the incentives the Nigerian Export Promotion Council or the federal government has in place or has been working on to support the creative industry, and in this case, the fashion industry in particular. I am aware that the Textile Industry Resuscitation Bill has recently been passed, but what's the guarantee that that is not going to be business as usual? Please unmute your mic, Mrs. Awolowo, if you can hear me. Unmute yourself, please.
Okay, can you hear me?
Thank you. Yes,
okay.
Loud and clear.
I really must appreciate the organizers of this program, the platform, for giving us the opportunity. This is really a big platform indeed, and the NEPC truly appreciates the opportunity to be on the platform. Going straight to your question, we all know that the fashion industry in Nigeria is big. There's no doubt about it. But whether that has been, the potentials in this industry has been harnessed to meet that global demand and to make impact globally is another question. Today, the government is doing quite a bit to ensure that this sector does meet global standards. Is it enough? Possibly not. But we are doing something, and there is hope that this will be improved over time. Government has put in place, for instance, incentives like the EEG. We are all aware of the Export Expansion Grant, which is a post-shipment incentive for exporters of non-oil products from Nigeria, including, of course, the fashion industry. We also have the Export Development Fund, which has also been put in place as a pre-shipment export incentive for exporters, especially in the fashion industry, which is actually a big industry globally, even as you stated. So even though the fund has not been established as it is, but the NEPC, despite all odds, still does support SMEs to attempt or for access into international markets. We still do assist SMEs in different forms by getting them onto trade shows, trade exhibitions, by helping them sponsor production processes where it becomes necessary, and we know that those brands have potentials. We also have there is an intervention fund of 500 billion. I think that is being administered by BOI for this sector, for the fashion industry, for the or the creative industry generally, about 500 billion. It's been administered. There's also a CTG fund on garments and textiles. That is also being administered by BOI. That has been there since 2008, 2009, I believe. Now, as a council, apart from these, we have established the Human Capital Development Center. Mrs. Omoyemi, incidentally, is working with us, collaborating with us on that center. So I'm sure she will be speaking a lot about that. We've used that to train so many in the fashion industry, and then we are still doing more. We are already producing also for global brands. That is also in the fall. We are hoping that going forward, we would be able to replicate this in other parts of the country. And then again, we have exposed through trade shows those in our fashion industry to international fashion fairs like the Magic, Coterie, the London African Fashion Week London, and then the Paris Fashion Fair. So we are doing quite a bit. Have we yet gotten there? And do we think we have done enough? Probably not, but we are on our way to doing that. We are trying to see that there is a structure for the fashion industry, and that the fashion industry will pull the necessary potential it has, and then we work with them through the value chain to ensure that they are able to meet global demands.
All right, thank you very much. Mrs. Udwak, she is standing in for the executive director of the Nigerian Export Promotion Council. She is a director at the Nigerian Export Promotion Council. Thank you for those insights. But before I come to you, Mr. Enakele, I'd like to ask Ms. Akerele, how effective have all these interventions been? Because we've had a history in Nigeria of a lot of policies being formulated, but there's always a disconnect between formulation and implementation. How you are an industry player, how effective would you say this has been?
Wow, you just really put me on the spot. You want me to go right in and sort of look at. I mean, so the reality is, we've always preached, right, that there's some fundamental challenges that plague the industry today. And I guess the one that says, infrastructure and so many other things. But I want to talk about funding. So yes, the Nigerian government has made funding available in different, through different things like the CTG fund and several others. But I guess the challenge has just been how fashion entrepreneurs can access it, and when we talk about accessibility, we're talking about, having the right collateral and all of that to be able to access the fund. So in reality, but over the years, I realized that the banks have sort of tried to, make that less stringent, but I'm not quite sure how successful they've been with that. And when we even talk about the people who've been able to access some of the funds, the question we need to ask ourselves is, how are they able to pay it back? Because you can only pay back, loans or a fund of that nature if there's a well-functioning fashion ecosystem. And that can only happen if certain things are in place. So yes, there's been several interventions by the government, and yes, the interventions that, should help us see like considerable shift in what's happening within our ecosystem today. But if that's happening is something else that's completely different, because you might have access to funding, but if infrastructure is not available, how effective will the funding be? You might have access to funding or grants, but if there's no access to be able to source raw materials properly within the industry, then how effective has that all been? However, I can speak to the work that we've done naturally, or the work that we do naturally with Nigeria Export Promotion Council, which is providing opportunities for access to market and being able to sort of scale capacity within the sector for people to be able to mass produce their garments. So in the last about 3 years, we've been able to train over 800 people and equip them with sewing machine operations skills for employability. And the reason why that project was set up was, to support the Nigeria Export Promotion Council's zero non-oil policy. And we realized that from experience, one of the challenges that designers have was to be able to mass produce in commercial quantities that's being required by stores. So no, we're not there yet, but we're taking steps to be able to gradually equip, so from the center, people are able to hire sewing machine operators, pattern makers, and just different people that can support them in their own either workshops or factories. Beyond that, with access to markets, Nigeria Export Promotion Council has been super dedicated to that. As we speak, we have designers who are scheduled to be on a trade show or on a trade fair. And what we're trying to do is to establish that link between, yes, you're based in Nigeria and producing, but how available are you? Which brings me, but I don't want to hog the microphone, which brings me to the next thing that, interventions might exist, but until we as a sector can maybe stop and, look around us to ask ourselves what is really missing, and what are the key drivers that should be driving this, driving the economy, then we can see then the impact of what the government is doing can really be felt. And the work that needs to be done is not just something that's going to be public sector led. It has to be a collaboration between public and private sector. So yes, there's signs of change and signs of progress, but it looks like it's stagnant because there's so much more that's still missing within the value chain. And if we don't begin to address all of this holistically, we're going to find out that 5-10 years down the line, we're still referencing a $2 billion fund that's not really made an impact within the industry. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Okay, Francis, I'd like you to opine on this accessibility to the federal government interventions. You are a fashion entrepreneur, you're an energy expert, or you've delved into fashion. So what's your take on what's happening so far on the government end and the disconnect with the people who need access to these funds?
Thank you, Emana. Thank you all, and a happy Independence Day to everyone. My name is Francis Enakele. Okay, to weigh in on what the question that was asked, I'll just piggyback on what Omoyemi said. Now, there's a huge gap between their funds available and the ability to access those funds. If you look through the questions that have been asked right now, people are asking, first question, how can the funds be accessed, and the rest. However, the federal government is doing its best as much as possible to create opportunities to push forward the fashion industry. Recently, I believe in September 18, the Lagos State government also established a Fashion Hub 1 that has been geared to actually give people as much skill acquisitions within the fashion industry. But aside skill acquisitions, you have so many fashion experts, so many people within the value chain that those funds do not really capture, and that is a big problem. So if you look through the value chain itself, it's not just about the manufacturing side, which is the production side. You have the logistics side, you have the designers, and you have the people that actually ship within Lagos or outside Nigeria. So the fund itself has to be expanded to cover the value chain holistically, not just to target one sector of one side of the value chain. So my take on the matter is this: although the federal government is doing what it can to make funds available, it needs to make funds accessible strategically throughout the value chain that will allow the fashion ecosystem to not just only grow, but to remain competitive within the global fashion industry from a holistic point of view. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Francis. Since we are still talking intervention, finance, everybody likes the issue of finance, in as much as we all know that the challenges of the industry transcend finance. But since we are on this, I'd like us to thrash this. Dr. Muda Yusuf, I am aware, or it's some common knowledge, that the export, one of the interventions of the federal government, the exports expansion grant, was abused. While we love to vilify the government for not doing enough, some exporters who had access to these grants ended up abusing them. And then those who may actually need those grants can't access them because of a bad history with the previous benefit.
Hello? Hello, moderator? Can other panelists hear me? Okay, let me just respond to the bit that I had from the moderator about the EEG, the Export Expansion Grant. That has been a huge issue. I'm sure the representative of the ED, NEPC will comment on this. We have been in and out of that. Many exporters still claim that they have billions of naira hanging there in the export expansion grants. There have been a lot of audits here and there. Admittedly, there were some abuses, but of course, these are management issues, these are governance issues, and it has been very frustrating for many of the exporters, because as I speak to you, many of them, most of them actually, have not been able to access the export expansion grant. The NEPC has done its best. At the time it went to the National Assembly, it said we are going to appropriate funds. It went back to finance. They appointed KPMG or one auditor to audit. So it has been back and forth. And up to now, I'm not sure there has been any headway. But briefly on the issue of financing, let me just comment on this. The risk of lending, even these intervention funds, the risk lies on the banks. And because the banks have the responsibility to pay back, they put in place very stringent measures. So in order to make the funds more accessible, we should create an environment where the banks will be able to take more risk with the borrowers of the funds. We can have the credit risk guarantee. We can have a situation where the central bank or whoever is providing the fund will take a large component of the risk in the event of failure. But to the extent that the banks are fully responsible for carrying the credit risk, they will continue to be very stringent, and the funds will continue to be very difficult to access.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Mrs. Etokowo, as the public sector and the government representative, I'm sure you're taking notes, and what a better time than today, Nigeria's 60th anniversary, than to hear straight from the mouth of the people. Okay, so let's move on to some other things as we progress. I'd like to ask you, Francis, you own several online retail fashion businesses. You operate from Nigeria, but have managed to penetrate a good part of the African market. How easy has it been to leverage technology and digitization to drive the visibility of your business and market growth, especially in this new normal, or the new never normal that we are in now, with the impact of COVID, where everything is moving to the virtual platform, or most of the world is moving from on-site operations to an online system? What can be done to improve digital solutions?
Okay, thank you, Emana. First and foremost, I'd like to say that the world is fast becoming a global village. With the increased level of trade and cultural exchanges driven by technology and digitalization. Africa is about, say, 1.3 billion people in population and has an internet and mobile penetration of about, say, 42 and 81%. And out of this, that is 81% respectively for internet and mobile penetration. And Nigeria on its own has internet and mobile penetration of about, say, 61 and 80%, with a smartphone penetration of 32%, and this is still growing. Now, this has been the primary focus for e-commerce platforms, with marketplaces springing up to drive fashion, to promote fashion entrepreneurs, and also to meet the needs of the consumers. Now, technology is very key to the industry now. And for us to think of technology as a normal department and not something that should be inculcated in our culture, we'll be thinking about things the wrong way. And this has been evidenced in this pandemic as business operations were able to proceed by the use of technologies, and transactions were able to go on, trade was able to go on with the use of digitalization and the rest. So the availability or access to research data and to understand the market itself, that is the change in industry dynamics or the shift in consumer behavior, has been made very easy by the availability of technology. Also, the use of big data and analytics to tailor consumer experience and to allow the customers to lead the way. Basically, because a business exists not only to make profit, but also as a solution to solve a problem. So the big data analytics will remain useful in fully engaging the social media platforms, understanding the consumer changes. A typical example is when you go to Google to browse for maybe an evening outfit, and you go to your Instagram page, you will notice that you have focused advertisements on different things you browse for. So that is technology being adopted to understand as well as to target what your needs are. And also, technology has also made it easy for people for the unbanked, basically, to be able to transact online without even having a bank account and the rest. So fashion companies need to understand the effect of digital transformation, as earlier mentioned, and how to inculcate that in their culture. But more importantly, the business needs to understand that for fashion to grow, being digital savvy is not an option. It's something that you can no longer do without, and people don't need to treat it as another department. So for me and my businesses that have been able to expand in terms of visibility, it has been the use of technology. And companies, fashion industries, fashion entrepreneurs need to tap into that, because if you do not tap into that, it will get to the point that you risk the position of losing out of your market share. So basically, technology is very essential in driving profitability as well as visibility in the fashion industry.
Thank you very much, Francis. So, Mrs. Etogowo, it's clear that the world is fast moving towards technology, or embracing technology, rather. Fashion is definitely not left behind. Now we have artificial intelligence algorithms predicting styles, trends, guide purchases, just as Francis has pointed out. How is the government adapting to this systemic shift, and what are the ways that the government is trying to key into this to help businesses scale and grow?
Okay, thank you for that question. The truth is, technology is the new normal for us. Before now, the NEPC facilitated participation in trade shows, and this had to be physical. You had to go to the market if the target market was France or the UK or the US. You had to physically be in that space, But today, I mean, we can't be there. So, of course, we have to deploy technology. So it's the new normal, and we are embracing it. We are working with a lot of our technical partners to work through with those in this industry to ensure that we build their capacity to be able to deploy technology in granting or in accessing international markets. Some of these international agencies are ITC. They've worked with us in the past, of course, under the She Trades Initiative to expose a lot of women into international markets. So we also have the CBI. We have quite the Italian Trade Agency. We have a number of them right now that we are working with to ensure that we build capacity of our exporters to be able to access the international market. Indeed, as we speak, there is an exporter that actually spoke with us and was able to attend the Coterie in New York. And she's doing fantastically well. She's called back to say, you know what, I'm already having meetings with international brands, global brands, and we think that is the new way to go. And the government will do everything in its power to ensure that those in this all-important sector are able to get access to the international market.
Thank you so much. So from everything that's been said now, it's clear that there are a lot of interventions in place. Technology is the new normal for every one of us, the fourth industrial revolution. So for the fashion entrepreneur out there, the word that resonates, or the catchphrase that resonates, is you can't afford to be left behind. There's a lot of intervention there. The problem is accessibility. So you need to arm yourself, get informed, do your research right, because even if you are thrown into a gold mine, you won't know what lies therein if you don't look close enough. So don't do yourself a disservice. Arm yourself with all the necessary information. Moving on now, Omoyemi, I'd like to ask, you're a lawyer and you have keen interest in the fashion industry, exporting Nigeria's fashion industry and culture on a global scale. What made you decide that it was fashion? What did you see in the industry that others aren't seeing? And we know it's not been an entirely easy business environment to operate in. How did you get into the industry in the first place, and why are you staying?
Well, so yes, I trained as a lawyer and worked in a law firm, but I don't think I deliberately set out to work in fashion. I found myself in a position where I was able to make that decision, to question myself, what do I want to do? And after quite a bit of soul searching, I realized that one thing I enjoyed was maybe dressing up at the time, and it was important to sort of explore what part of fashion I found particularly interesting. And I knew that it was definitely not about garment making. I didn't want to be a designer. I didn't want to sell clothes, and naturally gravitated towards I guess, styling. So I started my career as a stylist. And it's also very important for people to understand, because I find that a lot of people think the only role they can play in the ecosystem today is to be a fashion designer, which is really not true. So I started out as a stylist. In fact, I started out as an image consultant, post-training, working with banks and just different companies to talk to their staff about how to dress and how to look, and ended up working with Genevieve magazine, fashion styling, enjoyed it. And then sort of my career in the fashion industry sort of morphed from there to becoming more fashion. And that's because I realized that there was so much missing, within the sector. We had a lot of creative people, we have a lot of talent, but in terms of how to connect the dots effectively to be able to create an industry, I realized that there was a huge gap with that. So that has sort of set me down that proverbial rabbit hole in search of what's next, to be able to complete the dots really, and hopefully someday see an industry that's value driven, that beyond being value driven, you can actually see businesses that are sustainable and contributing significantly to Nigeria's economy. So all the work we do is sort of focused around that. And so fashion. So that's my fashion story, so to speak, in little words.
Interesting story indeed. So you've heard it all. Everybody doesn't have to be a designer. The value chain is wide. So create a niche for yourself and find out where you fit in. Don't be afraid to explore, so long as you know you have a calling in that direction. Okay, Mr. Yusuf, I'd like to ask, what are some of the challenges we've witnessed in the creative industry, and especially in the fashion industry, is the issue of regulation and quality control, which hampers global competitiveness. Nigerian products most times are not able to compete on a global scale because of the lack of adequate quality control. How can this issue of regulation and quality management be addressed?
Yeah, thank you very much. Issue of quality management and quality control is essentially a governance issue. Sometimes our regulatory institutions are not as strong. Sometimes they are not as professional. Sometimes there are also compromises in the way they do things. That is one. Secondly, is the totality of the environment itself. Sometimes an entrepreneur knows what to do, they know how to do it, but when the environment is too difficult for them to operate, they just manage with what they have and just bring out whatever they have, and that affects the quality of what they bring out. And that is a very key factor in competitiveness. There are quite a number of cross-cutting issues, some of which have been mentioned by the panelists, which affect practically all sectors, things impacting on the cost of production. We have talked about issues of energy. We have talked about issues of logistics. We have talked about issue of even having a dedicated park, because in many countries where we develop sector-specific export products, there's a dedicated park, call it industrial park, that is fitted with practically all the things that exporters or producers need. They just go there and everything is there for them to use. So we should be looking more at all of that. And we should also be looking more at our institutions. Sometimes the institutions also make things very difficult for those who want to engage in international business, export inclusive. Sometimes there are too many documentations. Sometimes there are fees imposed and all of that. Sometimes to even get the inputs, equipment, the fabrics and things that you need. And there are sorts of policies that make this difficult. At the end of the day, these things affect the competitiveness of export. Now that we are talking about diversification of the economy, we are talking about trying to push exports in other sectors with the collapse of oil price, I think we should be looking at the total package of incentives to support businesses who are in export of fashion and goods and garments inclusive.
Thank you very much. Dr. Awolowo, I'd like you to touch on the issue of collaboration, because it cannot be left behind for any business to thrive, especially this fashion industry. There need to be a lot of collaboration. Could you tell us some of the foreign and local collaborations that the NEPC has embarked on that is targeted directly to the fashion industry?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, the NEPC is private sector oriented as an organization. So we work directly with the entrepreneurs and with the sectors. We work, of course, we work with the Fashion Designer Association of Nigeria, that is FADAN. We are working directly with them. We are also working directly with the Nigerian Tailors Association, which is also another association that is still operates in this sector. We have the HCDC, which is the Human Capital Development Center, which is in Lagos. Incidentally, Mrs. Omoyemi is handling that. So I'm sure she can tell you of the benefits of that center. So we work directly because we discovered that if we put too much gap between ourselves and the entrepreneurs, they may not be able to access the incentives due to them. So we work directly with these entrepreneurs. As a matter of fact, we also work with international partners to ensure quality standards and certification. One of them is USAID. We work with USAID. We work with UNIDO. Like I said initially, we also work with ITC and the CBI, all to ensure that we build capacity and standards of products that leave Nigeria from this sector. Have we done enough and have we reached enough people? Again, I would say probably not, but we are working, it's a work in progress. We believe that if the public sector and the private sector work deliberately to deliver on fantastic global brands in Nigeria, then I think that the sky would not be our limit. So we are looking forward to working more with the private sector to ensure that we build brands that can stand anywhere in the world. Right now, it's not as if we don't have those brands. We have some brands that can compete anywhere right now. But because of the potential, the enormous potential we have in the country, we believe we can do a lot more because of the statistics available to us. We think that we haven't done enough and we can do much more. Again, maybe I should just mention, we also have the CFC, that is the Common Facility Center. That is in Aba for leather and leather products. All this is to ensure that we bring our services closer to the entrepreneurs and to provide them that enabling environment that they can work with. We are seeing to expand this to other parts of the country, funds permitting.
Thank you much indeed. Okay, the conversation continues. Remember, this is a 70-minute webinar breakout session of the platform 2020, a special edition to commemorate Nigeria's 60th independence anniversary. I must apologize once again for we started slightly behind schedule, or rather behind schedule, because we had to wait for the main broadcast on television to wind down before we kicked off the virtual session. So we'll delve right into the question and answer session in a moment. A couple of questions have come in. It's still part of the conversation, but we'll take some questions from the audience attending. Okay, Mrs. Etogowo, there's a question here that has to do with the issue of foreign exchange. We are aware that the Naira has continued to, or has depreciated, especially during the COVID-19, the heat of the COVID-19 pandemic and the lockdown, depreciated to the dollar a great deal. The central bank had to devalue the Naira as well. And this has caused an attendant increase in prices. What kind of subsidies is the federal government considering to ease this burden on the entrepreneurs, on the creative industry, so that they can remain in business?
Well, as an organization, we really don't give financial incentives because we are not a bank. So I believe that question would adequately go to the CBN because they've been giving out quite a number of palliatives and grants for different sectors. And I have no doubt that they have the fashion industry in mind. But for the council and within the scope of what it is that we can do at this time, we are really trying to reach out. We would do all we can to still reach out to the entrepreneurs, engage with them, and then where we need to interface with the financial institutions to assist them, like BOI, Nexim, which are also our partners, and indeed the CBN. If there's a need to do that, I'm sure at that level, at the government level, we would be able to relate with them, interface with them, and see how we can, make that work. But as a council, it's really not in our hands.
Okay, Dr. Yusuf, I'd like you respond to that.
Let me just make a few comments on that. I want to appeal to the NEPC. Exporters have complained that they don't have free access to their foreign exchange. And it's a major, major disincentive to exports. So I want to appeal to you to please engage with the CBN. If exporters have invested their money, they have invested efforts, they have taken a risk, and they got things on foreign exchange, please let them have free access to the foreign exchange. Generally, when you have a weak exchange rate regime, it's a good incentive for exports. But for every dollar you earn, it's a lot of naira for you. There are even countries in the world that deliberately devalue their currency because they want to promote exports. So the weakening of currency is an advantage for those who are in export business. I just thought I should have that. Moderator wanted to ask me a separate question.
I wanted you to react to that, but in the course of the response, I'd also want you to touch on the institutional support. How supportive have the institutions been to the creative industry?
Well, the institutions have been.
Items is it mentioned?
Yeah, the institutions have been trying their best, but some of them can be a very big bureaucracy, which can also pose a problem. Sometimes you want to do some businesses, it could be exports, it could be imports. You are saddled with so many documents, some of which don't even add any value to the process. So I think there's also a need to begin to do a proper audit of all of these processes to make it more efficient, to make it smarter, and to even deploy IT so that you don't have to be running from one office to the other. Some of these things can be done online. So I think that is what is important, to get the institutions to be more supportive of what the fashion industry is. And the creative industry, there has been a lot of challenges about the issue of piracy, for instance. It's a major source of frustration for those who are in that sector. They have gone to the police, they have gone to Copyright Commission. Everybody is looking helpless as far as the issue of piracy and intellectual property is concerned. So that is also an issue that I think we need to take on at the level of advocacy with the relevant agencies of government.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Akerele, this question is directed to you. I know we've touched on the issue of getting informed and all of that, all the interventions that are available, but the most entrepreneurs do not have that information. What can the government do to get people better informed in the area of mass sensitization campaigns, and so that those interventions do not just lie there untapped and fallow at the end of the day? What more can government do to get the information out?
I think this is an interesting question because I think the information is actually out there regarding some of the funds. Maybe at the point of launch, let me put it that way, there's quite a bit of information and sensitization. I know BOI, they do a bit of road shows and different things just to let people know, or to create some sort of awareness, workshops, and different workshops, just so that people are aware that some of these funds, that it actually exists. But I find that sometimes when it comes to communication, things can go amiss. Currently, most government agencies probably still use a lot of traditional media, but the people you're trying to target are not necessarily there. The people you're trying to target probably live online. So there's got to be, that sort of meeting or melting pot between both, to be able to create that approach where you are connected, where the government is connected with the audience, where they're speaking to the right people that they want to speak to. Otherwise, yes, there's sensitization because, there's advertising in the papers, the radio, there are different things, but sometimes the people were trying to, even in the newspaper, one has to know what day of the week creatives, buy traditional paper, if they do at all. But apart from that, you know, what is happening on Twitter, what is happening on Instagram, what is happening where else, YouTube, and, you know, everywhere else that you can find most of the people within the sector. It's important that, you know, there's some sort of alignment between the strategy in place and where the people are, so that, you know, nothing is lost in translation. And so I wouldn't necessarily say that there's lack of communication or there's lack of talking about it, but maybe there's got to be a little bit of an alignment, like, you know, to take the information to where the people are. And it's also important that creative people as well don't sit there and expect that information is going to come to them. A lot of times you also have to do your research. I think it's a, you know, it's the onus is on both sides, both parties. If you're looking for something, you have to do research as well, because half the time what we're looking for is really out there. So do your research. Everyone says Google is our friend. By the time you know, get to second or third page, you probably hit jackpot. So I think for me, the answer would be a bit of both for everyone, on the side of the practitioners and on the side of the government.
Okay, thank you so much, Ms. Akerele. Mrs. Togowo, how is the border closure affecting the export sector? Can the exporters to the West African sub-region explore the option of exporting through the seaports, and how feasible is this option?
Okay, so obviously, I'm sure Mr. Muda would really want to speak on that, but yes, of course, that is the closure of the border has affected some of our exporters, but it's not as if we are not not aware, or we do not know what the government is trying to achieve in closing the borders, you know. But it has affected some of our businessmen, SMEs, indeed, because we, of course, we are the biggest markets to the sub-region, for one. That trade across the sub-region is not something which we would want to stop now, particularly in view of the AfCFTA. So yes, the government is looking at this and looking to review issues concerning the closure of the border. Yes, it might give us, for now, I think closure of the border is causing a little bit of pain, but it's also causing us to look inwards, and we are looking at greater benefits from it, so that by the time we open the borders, I'm sure we would have been ready to hit the ground running. So yes, are there pains? Yes, absolutely. But are there also potentials in it? We need to look at that too. And I think there are opportunities to look. But again, in view of the AfCFTA, I think government is also looking at the need to reopen the borders in due course. We don't have any timelines yet, but absolutely, I think that is also on the pipeline.
Okay, I'd like to speak to that, Dr. Yusuf, while we prepare our final thoughts and work.
Oh, sorry.
Well, the border closure has been a big issue. Trade within the sub-region had practically collapsed as a result of the border closure. The government said people who want to export to the sub-region should go through the sea. The irony is that if you have to move by sea from Nigeria to Benin Republic, you could spend up to 5 weeks, because the ship will leave here and go first to the transit hub. That's why the shipping vessels have their hub. Their hubs may be in Europe. They go there before they come back to Benin or come back to Accra. So it has been very frustrating, and we have been engaging government on that. And we are hoping that very soon something will happen. Of course, there have been some beneficiaries, but I think there's almost a consensus now that the border closure has outlived its usefulness. We need to get our border management agencies to do their work very well. There has to be proper policing. There has to be use of technology to screen people and all of that. So the institutional aspect of it is what is most important. Because what we have seen is that sometimes when institutions fail, the consequences are now put on the people. And some very punitive measures are imposed. So that is the situation with the border closure.
Thank you.
Hi, Emana. Just to weigh in the conversation, what comes to mind is how can the Nigerian fashion industry isolate itself from the rest of the world? The border closure, yes, the government had its, yes, it had its usefulness, But then again, it decreased the competitive nature for the fashion industry in Nigeria, because how can you actually be exporting items how can you actually increase your demand for your products if your borders are closed and if your borders are closed? So as much as possible, even if the government goes out to put certain policies in place, it needs to consider the stakeholders, the holistic stakeholders, to see what sort of incentives or policies it can put in place to still encourage competitiveness of the Nigerian fashion industry. Recently, the Vice President Yemi Osinbajo noted the Nigerian fashion industry to, in the next few years, to be a very big revenue driver for the government. So it starts from now. The government needs to look at different incentives. It can put in place different strong policies that it can put in place, backward integration policies with a very aggressive exportation program to encourage local participation, encourage local investment, and also to attract foreign direct investment. So just not to just come up with policies, but come up with policies that are strategic to encourage the fashion industry is very key.
Thank you so much. Ms. Akerele, your final thoughts on, and then your final message to the fashion entrepreneur and also to the government. So we partner to move the fashion industry forward as a relevant economic driver for Nigeria.
Thank you very much. For me, I think it's important that we understand that the growth and development of the Nigerian fashion industry is not something that should be done only by the Nigerian government. There's got to be a determination among stakeholders to come together to to work together to strengthen what we have. And in coming together, there's some key things that we have to start thinking about. Number one, sustainability. It's important for us to start to be even more conscious about the people, empowering people within the process, ensuring that the process of designing these clothes is not necessarily done in a way that, sorry, can you hear me? It's not necessarily done in a way that's harmful to people or the environment. We have to start. Francis was just talking about border closure. We have to start exploring how to create vertically integrated businesses, so that even if there's border closure for 2 years, we can explore how to source locally to be able to build and create collections. Because what that does is not just for ease of doing business or for convenience. What it does is the communities it empowers. What it does is keeping that money within our country, as opposed to that process of trading outside where the money always goes back out instead of staying here with the people who need it most. So beyond sustainability, you've also touched on some things today, like technology, digitalization. How can we use that as a tool for strengthening the ecosystem? Those are conversations that we need to be having today that can help us to drive productivity and take the industry where it needs to be. We have to think about sourcing. We have to talk about industrialization, apparel manufacturing. How can we, scale up in a way that is still, where there's still elements of traceability, in the sense that, we don't lose essence of the people. People are well paid for the work that they do, and we don't end up being another Bangladesh. How do we ensure that, as an industry, there's access to funding, but in creating opportunities for access to funding, the government and stakeholders and the banks, they're mindful that, creative people, what exactly from exploring collateral to looking at where we found ourselves today, what is the moratorium on those loans? I mean, do we have more opportunities to create more grants? I mean, that can empower, especially when some of those brands are just starting out, before we start thinking of MSME loans and things like that. We have to start thinking of alternate sources of funding to be able to empower, equip, and strengthen what we have today. Stakeholders need to come together as well to be able to look at sourcing. How are we going to, and fashion for me doesn't just start with the end garments. How can we go back to looking at the cotton farmers, their role within the value chain? How do we explore, ensuring that from the seed process, the quality of seeds that we're planting, we're not really doing anything that's even further harmful to you know, to the environment within that process, you know, so there's so much more that needs to be done beyond us just thinking all we have to do is go with, you know, go to the government and expect them to solve all of these problems. Education is very important. There's so much gaps that so many gaps need to be filled that's currently not being filled, considering everybody thinks, you know, not everybody, a lot of people think, you know, the most important thing to do in fashion today is to be a designer. Meanwhile, we're still looking for technology, for people to create, I don't know, the next AI, next I don't know, next thing that can create some sort of innovation. I sat with my team today and we're working on a panel for technology, and we sat there for hours trying to brainstorm on, you know, who's doing something particularly interesting with fashion technology today in Nigeria. And we're still here trying to think, because we know stylists, we know makeup artists, we know hair people, we know apparel manufacturers, but there's some key things, you know, we don't even know if, you know, technology experts, we don't know textile designers are few and far between. So there's really much more that we as stakeholders have to do than what we think government has to do. So how do we bring the public and private sector together? How do we bring ourselves together within the same room so that there's unity, there's strength, and we can, you know, really begin to have the conversations that we need to have today? How do we create businesses or sustainable businesses out of creativity or out of creative talent? How do we empower artisans and craftsmen to be able to benefit from, you know, this skill that's been passed down to them from generation to generation? How do we create value? How do we begin to contribute in a meaningful way to the Nigerian economy? So those are the key things for me that I want to leave us with, that let's not think about what people can do. Let's ask ourselves what we can do to contribute to the growth of this ecosystem. And I think once we begin to ask those questions, I guess that will probably be the beginning of the change that we all hope to see. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thought-provoking indeed. Mr. Togowo, I'll move over to you. I'd like you to make your closing statements, touching on how we are taking advantage of the trade treaties, the ECOWAS trade liberalization scheme, to export in the West African sub-region, AGOA to export to the United States. You know, how are we taking advantage of these trade treaties? There's the AFCTA that you've talked about. How are we going to take advantage of them going forward to translate to wealth for the Nigerian economy and all stakeholders involved?
So I have listened again to Omoyemi, and we're speaking the same language because incidentally, we really work together. So yes, I agree with everything she said. And in addition, I'd like to say that, yes, when it comes to like AGOA, for instance, we are working assiduously with our technical partners to ensure that Nigeria gets really takes advantage of this agreement. We are developing a strategy as it is today for an AGOA strategy, and we are hoping to really work with the private sector, because you see, at the end of the day, even if we have this pen down and we have all written down and government agreements, it is the private sector that would move these agreements. So we are looking to partnering with the private sector, whether it is in AGOA or with the ETLS, the ECOWAS Trade Liberalization Scheme, and of course that has interdepartmental committee that works on the administration of that, and we are currently working on it, and a lot more people have applied under the ETLS. It is a regional agreement, and so we are working with other departments, organizations, the public sector to ensure that we get the benefits from the ETLS currently. And we've talked to any of our SMEs registered with us, working with us. If you do have any issues on the ETLS, if you reach our website, we have all the information on our website on all these programs. So yes, we are working with the private sector. We'll continue to do that. That's with regards to the AFCFTA. There's already there's a body working on that now. Again, from the press, which is situated in the presidency. We are working with them also to ensure that the private sector gains from whatever decisions is taken at the end of the day. But for me, maybe as closing remarks, I would like to say that, you see, as a country, we may not be able to go on vacation in space because others are looking to doing that. We may not be able to go into nuclear technology. Others have done that, and frankly speaking, do we really need it? No. But you see, I believe that we have a natural affinity towards fashion. It comes naturally to us. A young girl would pair clothes and you would wonder, you know. So we have this. What we need today is to come together, the public and the private sector, to be deliberate in forming a structure for this sector, having a structure, and then building capacity, and then putting in place all that we require to ensure that this structure works. You know, and trust me, as an organization and as government, we are positioned to assist the private sector as best as we can. We always say that wherever we go. However we can, we are positioned to assist the private sector to ensure that Nigerian brands go global.
Thank you so much, Mrs. I'd just like to respond that you know, in order to avoid brain drain and consistent capital flight, we may, it may take that, this may just be baby steps, but eventually we also need to get into space, not necessarily to need to go to Mars for holiday, but there's a lot. So we can have it all. Nigeria is a country that's blessed with the right institutions in place, with the right policies in place, with the public-private partnership, right private participation, we can actually get there. So we shouldn't limit ourselves and say, oh, this is what we need, fashion, so that we can afford to gain credibility in the international community as well by building our reputation, because we are intelligent people and we are resilient people. All right, thank you so much. Ms. Enakele, I'll take your closing remarks before I go to Dr. Yusuf. What do you have to say to that budding fashion entrepreneur who's still testing the waters, and to the established one who needs reinvention? And maybe briefly, what do you have to say to the government of the day as well?
Okay, thank you, Amanda. With a population of over 200 million people, 774 local governments, 525 spoken native languages, and well over 250 ethnic groups, Nigeria's uniqueness is in its diversity and its rich cultural heritage that is pregnant with stories to tell. Fashion is one of those languages that can be used to express ourselves. So for the budding entrepreneur, the opportunity is readily available for you. Throughout the value chain, understand, research, identify your uniqueness. That is your niche along the value chain. It's been mentioned here, you don't need to be a stylist, you don't need to be a designer. Know your capabilities, know your competence, know what you do well, and know what you do, know what you do well, and know how to do it well. So basically, you have to volunteer a lot, train yourself, get aware, research, get the necessary information that you need to actually break into the fashion industry and actually grow. Focus on creating value, and when you do create value, there will be demand, and when you create demand, there'll always be financing that will be available. Focus on yourself, and for the government itself, for the government, public or private institutions, they need to create an enabling and business environment for the fashion industry to actually grow. that is setting up and executing strategic policies throughout the value chain, not just only in the manufacturing side or the logistics side, throughout the value chain. And they need to be consistent with the right policies and contributions. And when they're consistent with the right policies and contributions, there'll be increasing investment appetite, because that particular sector, which is the fashion industry, will be the risk, and it will be a wet appetite for other investment. So for the budding entrepreneurs, please focus on your business, focus on creating value. As much as possible, get information, get research. As Omoyemi said, Google is your friend. Go out there, research, get the information, and make the best out of it. COVID-19 has shown us one thing: Nigeria and Nigerians are resilient. So as much as possible, let's explore the opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you indeed. Dr. Yusuf, what's your advice to your final words to the policymakers to drive export and boost economic growth?
Well, thank you very much. Just to say that we have a responsibility as a country to engage our government. This is a democracy, and in the light of, or in the context of public-private partnership, there has to be regular engagement to let government know what the challenges are, what the constraints are. We have the Ease of Doing Business Office that is headed by Dr. Jumoke Duwole. He's always willing to listen to practically all sectors, particularly the creative industry, to identify the challenges and escalate this to the office of the Vice President or to the office of the President. If there's any sector in which we have very easy chance or a good chance of dominating the entire continent and the entire black race, it is in the fashion industry. Because I've seen people, ladies coming from East Africa and all of that, to come and meet their fashion designers in Lagos. Some come from the UN to come to Lagos, you know, and each time our ladies go out there, you need to see how they are admired, even in Europe, in America. So it's a space that we have a fantastic opportunity to dominate. And to take the fullest advantage of that, the AFCTA will soon be in place by 1st of January 2021. It presents a very great opportunity for us to go beyond our shores and also dominate the entire African region as far as fashion industry is concerned. The sector is labor intensive, that is very good. And the sector is also dominated by Nigerians. It's an indigenous sector. That is another added advantage, unlike some other sectors. So it's something that we need to support from the private sector side, from the government side, to ensure that we actually grow the sector. Thank you very much.
Many thanks indeed to all of our panelists, and of course to you, our esteemed audience, for joining the conversation. We don't take it for granted. Remember that we are Nigeria. We are people resilient and purposeful. So let's use today, the 60th anniversary celebration of Nigeria's independence, to remind ourselves to dare to dream, beyond dreaming, dare to believe, and beyond believing, dare to venture. And of course, I'd say, yes, we can. This
Sorry, we've lost the presenter.
So
Are we done?
Are we rounding up, or
Yes.
are there questions to be answered? Have we?
I don't know. She was speaking and then she went off. I don't know if that means that we are done.
Okay. Should we give her a little bit of time? Maybe she.
Time. Yeah. Maybe she come back to wrap this up. Yeah. Okay. Okay. If she comes back, we see her. If she don't come back, we don't see her. Ah, Jesus. Ayo, you don't come out. Francis is the host now. How can Francis be the host now? No mind Ayo, you don't try. You don't sleep. Oh. I wake up 5 a.m. I see him. I saw him. He was answering to the question where I sent them around 2 a.m. Me, I didn't sleep until.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. We can hear you.
Okay, we're still waiting for Emana to join in, but if she cannot, we've come to the end of this session. I'd like to thank everyone for taking their time, the panelists, the co-panelists for taking their time to join in on this meeting, as well as for the participants. We thank you so much for taking your time to send in your questions.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Sue. Thank you very much. And Mr. Omoyemi, it's nice seeing you.
Lovely seeing you. See you soon. We have quite a bit going on. So see you soon, Ma.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Okay then.
Okay, bye everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Hi, man, I can see and hear you.
Okay, thank you so much, Francis. And this is some of the challenges one experiences in Nigeria, smack in the middle of a virtual session. The internet connectivity decided to act up, decided to have a mind of its own. Well, I was, thank God we've ended the session already. And I was saying thank you to our esteemed audience and to our distinguished panelists. This is indeed a call to action. Rather than sit on the sidelines and complain that government doesn't have the will to implement the right policies or isn't formulating the right policies, let's choose to act. Let's choose to take the bull by the horns and do what we need to do to move our country forward. It is our country. We have just one country, and that is Nigeria. Even if you have a second country, well, you're a Nigerian. So buy into the Nigerian dream and be part of the rewriting of the Nigerian history for good. And of course, as I said earlier, what better time than now for our government to match action with words, or to match words with action, and do the needful and institute the necessary support to drive industries, to drive export for economic growth, as we tell our Nigerian story to the world through fashion. Thank you very much. Well, you can also, if you enjoyed the conversation and you want to learn more and you want more of your questions answered, you could join the Fashion Entrepreneurs Community Group of the Covenant Nation, just log on to www.insightsforliving.org, and you'll find all the registration details that you need. And if you also want to reach out to any of our panelists, you have some questions to direct to them, you could do so by reaching the Covenant Nation via any of its social media platforms. Thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your evening. Happy Independence celebration. Bye-bye.